Kalau pamili.
It all began many generations before the Papalangi, the white man, came with metal fish hooks and cotton cloth. Those first discoverers of these islands chose chiefs to lead them and to care for them. And from the very first, their clothing, for chief and for commoner alike, was made from a bark. We call the finished material siapo. It is better known as tapa. There is very much tradition in it. Not many of our people make siapo today. And it is worn only for ceremonial occasions. This was not so when the Polynesians first came to these islands. They didn't need much clothing in our climate, but every Ainga, every family, made their own siapo. And even then, it was an art as well as a necessity. These are my people. I am Samoan. Mele leala itafea. My name is Mary Pritchard. Oa'u o se fai siapo. I am a maker of Samoan siapo. All the work on tapa is done by women and girls. It has always been so. From the gathering of all the materials from the bush to the last brush stroke, the men were never involved. Today, the Samoan does not need tapa. It is a long and slow process, and we can buy cloth and ready-made clothes brought here from all over the world. The old women do other things now, and the young girls are much too busy to scrape the bark and make the dyes.
We got a T-E-A-M, it's on the beat. E-A-M, we got a T, it's on the beat, it's really head to the job. Come on, sharks, let's get them alive. We got a T-E-A-M, it's on the beat. E skin of my life. We got a T-E-A-M, there's gonna be E-A-M. We got a team that's on the beam that's really hot to the job. Come on, sharks, let's get 'em all night.
I, too, do other things. I spend time at the airport restaurant, which my daughter operates, and find it quite exciting. Travelers from all over the world pass through. Here, giant jets come and go, and cars, trucks, and buses are common sights. But I still take the time to make tapa, and I still try to encourage others. But even a very short distance away, over the hills on the North Shore, where there are no cars or trucks, not even roads into the villages, the women do not make tapa. Maybe only a very few, but not many.
On that tapa. Or why don't you try and see what you can pick from here? It's my bird.
After World War II, that's actually when they started fading out tapas. People started to leave the island, all the tapa makers. And every village had tapa makers.
You start out with just a plain piece of material. And before you can use the symbols, you have to divide that up. Why don't you take your tapa and see what you can come up with it. Try a triangle bird. See what you
Thanks, Grandma. I'll try it when I go.
For me, it is an art. The only thing that I am trying to do now, or have gone into, I'm trying to to utilize the smaller design that was used in tattooing, which is associated with tapa designing. Perhaps it was from the tattoo design that the women got their tapa designs from. Whether they did tattooing on the men or from wherever they came from, or whether they did it after they settled in Samoa. Whether they brought it with them, but somehow I have a feeling they brought the tapa with them. So perhaps tapa design was where the designs for the tattooing came from. Because if you see any of the old tapa boards, it's really mostly lines, and they're very, very intricate and fine. Usually, the older women, all they do is design. They just design. Then they mark off where the yellow would go, the red go, and the black. They just give it dashes. Then the younger women will take over and apply the colors. And if they run out of yellow, they just call on the little ones, the 6, 7, 8-year-olds, to go and get some yellow dye. And these children know what to go for. Or go and climb a lipstick tree and bring some of the berries. Make them. They're the runners, you know. My home is also my studio. It stands on an old lava flow on the edge of the small village of WAYNE. It is very close by the sea. I love the sea in all its many moods, and I have never in my life been very far from its sound. I love what lives over the sea, and I love what lives in the sea. Fish, plant, coral, and shell. Nature has always been part of my life, and so it is part of my work. In a hut like this, not far from my own village, I learned how to make tapa in the traditional way. I was taught by old Samoan women who were dedicated to keeping the art alive. There are almost none of us now who keep their art alive. I am one of the few. Tapa is like a stiff, thick cloth, somewhat like parchment. It is made from the bark of the paper mulberry plant. It used to be plentiful. It isn't anymore. Village custom had it that each adult woman had to have a patch of it. But they have lost interest in the things they did 40 years ago. The bark is peeled from the plant in long strips. The outer layer is scraped off with clam shells. By scraping the bark and then pounding the swatches with an ironwood mallet, I can stretch them into wider and wider patches of tapa material. we need a glue, and this we get from a common fiber tree. We call it the sanga. When the sanga bark has been chipped and soaked in water, a jelly-like substance is formed. This is the glue we use in the first layer. It is strong enough to hold the tapa to the board, yet weak enough so that it can be peeled in one piece from the board without tearing. However, to build up the layer of the tapa, another kind of glue is used. The second kind of glue we also get from the forest, the arrowroot. It has to be grated and boiled to make a paste. Last time I tried to make a tapa, they didn't tell me about the two kinds of glue. After asking all these questions as to what to use in making a tapa, they didn't tell me that my first layer goes on with the sanga. I went home and I used the arrowroot right onto the board. When I was finished with the tapa, I tried to peel it, and I tore the whole thing out. After so much labor, I went back and said, I couldn't peel my tapa off. And I said, you Valère, you used the arrowroot. Valère is stupid. And so they explained then about the sanga, and I went home and I looked for the sanga, found it, and I had no more trouble after that. While I wait for the tapa to dry on the board, I make my brushes. These we get from the pulpy, fibrous segments of the pandanus pod. Because of the slowness of the preparations, I usually work on several tapas at the same time. Maybe as many as 15. I use 4 colors only for my work: brown, black, red, and yellow. All come from the forest. The brown looks red, but it dries brown. It is the basic dye. It comes from the bark of the oa tree. The red dye comes from the lipstick tree, and from the turmeric root comes the yellow dye. These can be a great range of yellows, depending on the age of the plants. It can be everything from a bright canary yellow to an almost orange yellow. By adding a little of the oa to the yellow, I can get a rich golden brown. The only difficult dye is the black. It is tiresome to prepare, and I have to keep quantities of it on hand. It is made from candle nuts. The nuts are first baked in an oven, and umu, when the soot is collected and oa is added, we get our black dye. I do a much finer designing than the women used to do. They did very broad ones, big, that, for instance, one this size, they would start in the center and they can go right to that corner. I'm not very much good in the broad designs. Somehow they just don't appeal to me. I like to include all my symbols in there. And they are symbols because I've had people trying to find a certain tapa that means, tells a story. Says, I don't know of any. Traditionally, the tapa was printed on a carved board, the upeti. The upeti were made from very hard wood, so the carved designs were seldom altered. An upeti was often handed down from generation to generation, unchanged. So then, the design was set even before the tapa was printed. Even the colors were fixed. Brown and black always.
Palava. Yeah, this way.
Then the old women of Leone broke from that tradition, and I learned from those old women. They started using bright colors. And they did not always work from an upeti. Beautiful, stately old Tuyuli, Leoso, and Colone Leoso, the daughter-in-law. She was a designer, Colone. And I can still remember their faces, their voices, especially old Tuyuli with her beautiful way of speaking, very poetical, beautiful Samoan tone of voice. These women really are the ones that made me interested in Samoan life. Only one thing is certain. Every element of the design will come from nature. This is not because I wish it to be so. It is our tradition. 9 motives from nature must be used. The fa'atuli, fa'angongo, fa'asingango, fa'aau upenga, fa'aaliao, laupaongo, Lauulu, Tusili'i, and 2 more or more fai. I may arrange them any way I like. I may make combinations, but I may not change them. It is, I think, a reflection of my people's character. We are a free people, and we are happy in that freedom. But we temper our freedom with a respect for tradition. We are proud of that tradition, even though we are not held rigidly by it. If I lose something of individuality, I gain more in something of brotherhood. If I sometimes deny myself something I want, I delight in the feeling of doing something, of sharing something we all understand and find joy in. As against the traditional brown and black siapo, I use more color. I like it that way. I like the feeling of play, of discovery, of surprise, of making connections and relationships on the spur of the moment. When I first started out, I didn't charge people. I used to just sit down and make them, and happy in the thought that someone enjoyed my work. I was against my mother's principles. Oh Lord, she couldn't understand why I had to sit down and work on tapas when I was married, had a husband to look after me. I said, well, what's wrong with it, Mama? I enjoy doing it.